Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, June 8th, 2015. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, checkpoints, harassment, and Cobra Commandos. This isn't your granddaddy smoke-filled room. This is Bilderberg 2015.
These are villains that showing off around boardrooms, they go, "We're liberal, did you hear? We want to help the children." I love being liberal. Never mind secret groups meeting in the Austrian Alps.
Well, INFOWARS reporters are on the ground in Austria to cover the Bilderberg Group's meeting this week, but so are the police in massive numbers, very different from last year. Look at this article from Kit Daniels. Bilderberg cops have set up a Chernobyl-style exclusion zone around the secretive meeting of world leaders, and points out this is over 3 times the size of Manhattan. There's more than 2,000 police officers roaming the Austrian countryside, setting up roadside checkpoints to keep reporters and the public miles away from the Interalpen Hotel where the event is being held. And he sums it up by saying, simply put, the Austrian police are telling journalists they do not have access to a public area that is over 3 times the size of Manhattan, assuming the exclusion zone is roughly a 10-kilometer circle around the Interalpen Hotel, with it at the center. A very different situation than we saw last year in Copenhagen. Last year in Copenhagen, they had us just on the other side of a 4-lane road. We were able to watch people come and go. That was very, very unusual for any Bilderberg meeting. People were commenting about how unusual that was. Perhaps they were uncomfortable with reporters being as close as we were last year. We were able to see them talking with each other during breaks on the balcony and the terrace. We were able to see them going for jogs. This year, they have people back miles away, and the Austrian police are very in your face, as we saw from the reports of Rob Dew and Josh Owens this afternoon. It may also have something to do with some secret visitors that may be coming to see them. We have an official list up on INFOWARS right now, the full attendee list, they say, and the agenda, the official list from Bilderberg. But of course, this is a secretive group. You don't expect them to be very candid about what they're doing. They're telling us that they're going to be talking about globalization. Really? Globalization? As Charlie Skelton, one of the reporters for The Guardian, who always covers Bilderberg, says, as if anything they've ever discussed could be put under that heading. Of course, that's all that they do is talk about globalization. They're also going to be talking, though, about U.S. elections. They make that very clear. The people that are going to be there, of course, are people like Ed Balls. We saw him last year as he was pulling out his suitcase full of documents. But of course, Bilderberg says there's no minutes taken, there's no reports written, no policy statements are issued. Yeah, they're not going to tell us what they do there, but believe me, they are taking in a lot of information. Ed Balls was the highest ranking official to lose his seat in this last election in the UK. He had been Shadow Secretary of the Exchequer, essentially the position of Secretary of the Treasury here in the United States for the opposition. They say that they're going to be operating, of course, under Chatham House rules. That's a special set of rules that they've created for themselves. That's something that came out of England. Of course, we have something in the U.S. called the Logan Act, but you know, we kind of have a moratorium right now on enforcing laws against elite corporations and U.S. government officials for the time being. But that's going to come back. We're going to see that that's going to come back. Now, looking at some of the other people on the list, of course, we see David Petraeus. This will be, I think, his 3rd in a row where he's going. Of course, Henry Kissinger, the perennial, Princess Beatrice. We also have people from HSBC and Goldman Sachs. All the banks are there, as well as the media. I guess the banks are there just to show that there's no hard feelings after having been hit for kind of a slap on the wrist fines for some of the largest riggings of markets, pretty much every market, everywhere. HSBC, of course, with multiple people here at the Bilderberg, they've been convicted multiple times of doing money laundering for drug dealers, drug cartels, as well as terrorist groups. We also have another interesting group of people there, and that's the ones from Google this year. There's an article up on INFOWARS from Paul Joseph Watson. Google executive behind the ingestible ID chips is going to be attending Bilderberg this year. She's one of 3 executives from Google that will be there this year. She is a former DARPA director. That should raise some eyebrows because there's been a lot of acquisitions that indicate that Google may be moving into a full-out military-industrial complex posturing. We saw after the DARPA robotics contest last year that they acquired all of the most promising corporations that were involved in that. They were brought in, and of course, besides Eric Schmidt, who is the CEO of Google, and this DARPA executive that's their former DARPA executive, they also have Demis Hassabis, who is the vice president for Google DeepMind. This is a artificial intelligence program where they do not program the artificial intelligence, but it learns. So they are creating an artificial intelligence that's capable of learning. Now, going back to this particular ingestible chip idea that comes from this former DARPA personnel, DARPA director actually, now working for Google, the pill has a small chip inside of it with a switch, she said. It also has what amounts to an inside-out potato battery. When you swallow it, the acids in your stomach serve as the electrolyte that powers it up. The switch goes on and off and creates an 18-bit ECG, electroencephalogram. And she says, essentially, your entire body becomes your authentication token. Isn't that special? Now, they point out that the chip has already been approved by the FDA. That also helps you when you have connections in high places where you can make friendly relations at Bilderberg. You can do it in secret. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many people are asking about these connections with the military and Google. One is The Wire's Adam Clark Estes. He says, what in the world does Google have planned that it's hiring military leadership? That's right. What in the world do they have planned? Well, the other aspect, of course, with Bilderberg is the politicians. We just had the G7 that happened in Germany not far away. Now we have the people who are the real rulers, not the political puppets that they control. But of course, we will see political puppets making a visit, making an appearance here. As Steve Watson points out, looks like Bilderberg might be backing Hillary for the 2016 presidency. Certainly, she has a strong supporter who is on the official attendee list. He points out the Bilderberg 2015 conference this weekend in Austria will focus, at least in part, they say, on the American elections. Now, one of the people there is Jim Messina. He was the head of Barack Obama's re-election campaign in 2012, and he's just come back to the United States after leading the deeply unpopular UK Prime Minister David Cameron to a surprise majority victory in British elections. So this is a guy with a very strong track record in getting people elected. Certainly getting David Cameron elected, that was quite a bit of surprise for everyone. He says, I'm coming home tomorrow, he told MSNBC, and it's whatever it will take to get Hillary elected. So that's now his focus after getting an unpopular prime minister re-elected in the UK. Now, Watson points out in his article that in 2008, of course, the Bilderberg Group met with both Clinton and Obama when they had it in Northern Virginia. He points out that in years past, the elitist James A. Johnson had a direct hand in selecting Obama's running mate for the 2008 election, and also selected John Kerry's running mate, John Edwards, in 2004 after Edwards impressed Bilderberg elitists Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller with a speech that he gave in Italy that year. Now, the question is, of course, Hillary Clinton has her man on the inside, the guy who is dedicated to getting her reelected. How about any of the other politicians? Well, it turns out, just so coincidentally, that Jeb Bush is not going to be very far from where this meeting is going to be taking place. He has scheduled a trip to Europe. As a matter of fact, he's going to be in Berlin tomorrow for 2 days. And that's only about a 2.5-hour plane flight with a commercial flight from that area. So easily he could travel secretly to this meeting. And of course, he has someone on the inside that has a very strong track record as well. Robert Zoellick, who is now the chair of international advisors at Goldman Sachs, is somebody that has a very long history with the Bush family. He's been managing director of Goldman Sachs. He headed a CFR committee back in 2005 on the North American Union. Ted Cruz's wife, Heidi, was part of that organization, that recommendation from the CFR committee on North America. They recommended a common border around North America. That's what David Petraeus, Bilderberg attendee, has said. That's what comes after America is North America, meaning the North American Union, saying that we're now 20 years into NAFTA. And of course, a recommendation that came out of that CFR committee chaired by Robert Zelig, with Heidi Cruz as one of the 30 members there. They recommended that there would be a security perimeter around the three countries. And of course, NORTHCOM was created just back in 2002, perhaps for that same purpose. Its jurisdiction is Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Maybe we should say the former countries of Canada, U.S., and Mexico. Now, Zelig was also the U.S. the Deputy Secretary of State under W. Bush. He was also U.S. Trade Representative under W. Bush, but his history goes back even to George H.W. Bush. He was the counselor of the U.S. Department of State, and he was president of the World Bank. So Jeb Bush is well represented, as well as Hillary Clinton, and of course, he is in the area. We'll be looking for further updates, and we're going to have a lot of reports from our reporters this week in the area. It's going to be hard for them to get the kind of shots that we did last year. If you look at some of these shots that we've got here, we were just, as I said, right across the street. We could see them coming and going very easily, so it was kind of easy to keep tabs on them. Perhaps this year is why they went to a remote location with such heavy security, with such a large perimeter, because perhaps they want to have some secret guests come in. Now stay with us right after the break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and how that relates to this secretive organization that has been meeting for decades. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Now before us today are several trade agreements that are coming at us very quickly. Of course, we've now had the Senate pass a fast-track trade agreement. One of the senators who's looked at this, Senator Jeff Sessions, is outraged at what he has seen. We're going to go over that in a minute, but I want you to understand where this is all headed. This is certainly not about trade. This is about economic and political union. It's about global governance. It was 60 years ago in the same city where the G7 just met that Bilderberg laid down the plans for a unified Europe, talking about how they were going to bring it together economically and then bring it together as a sovereign union. They laid down the plans for the European Union as well as the euro currency. Of course, we had the NAFTA agreement that was created 20 years ago. David Petraeus says we now have a North American Union. We are now post-America. That should explain to a lot of people who are scratching their heads about what's going on at our borders, what is really going on at our borders. As Nancy Pelosi said, we just have two communities that happen to have a border running through it that to them means nothing more than the border that runs between Texas and Oklahoma, for example. But it was 42 years ago that Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller put together the Trilateral Commission, the goal of which was to unify the three blocks that they saw: North America, Europe, and Asia. And now we see that with these trade partnerships, but they are not partnerships. The words that no one will use, the word that no one will use is treaty. But Jeff Sessions, a senator who actually took the time to go down and look at one of these secret agreements, lays it out in a letter, a public letter that he put out. It's an open letter, but it's a letter to Obama. This is what he has to say. He says, when they passed this fast-track trade agreement, there were some very troubling concessions. He said, these concessions include the power to write legislation, the power to amend legislation, the power to fully consider legislation on the floor. Those have all been abdicated. You understand that? Okay, they're not writing this treaty. It's been written for them. They do not have the power to amend that treaty. They don't even have any power to control how that treaty gets to the floor. It will automatically get there in 45 days max. They can only accelerate it. They can do nothing to stop it, nothing to amend it. And he said the power to keep debate open on the Senate floor until cloture is invoked. In other words, they take away the ability to have a filibuster. And the most important thing, he said, is the constitutional requirement that treaties receive a 2/3 vote. You see, the TPA, the Trade Promotion Authority that just passed in the Senate, only received 62 votes. That should tell you something. That is the mechanism to pass these trade agreements that are before us. And it's not just the TPP or the TTIP, the Transatlantic and Trans-Pacific agreements that we've been talking about for a long time. There's now another agreement, the TISA, and there will be many more, because this fast-track trade authority is going to give to the executive, to Obama and to the president who comes after him, the capability to do executive trade agreements essentially without Congress's approval. Under fast track, there has never been a treaty that has been rejected. They have skewed it so much that it will not happen.